did you start as a Christian believing in the soul? Like
100%. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Was there like and I take it you don't believe in the soul now, right?
I don't even think it's possible.
Yeah, that's because
in
you
the
don't
Christian
have a soul.
conceptualization of it, I don't think it's possible.
Okay, interesting. Was there something that happened? Something you learned in neuroscience that you
ATP synthase production in any individual neuronal mitochondria, opening sodium and potassium ion channels on the neuronal cell membrane to allow transmission through diffusion back and forth in order to create the action potential for any individual neuron to fire, to release the neurochemicals required for us to even have this conversation. So that's what did it for me.
Yeah. So I obviously understand all of that, but for my audience, they might not.
Yes, I know. I know that this is a redundant conversation for you.
Yeah. Like I'm a little bit bored, to be honest, because I've heard it before. In fact, so okay. but for my audience,
what did it for me though. So
yeah.
That and studying Broca's and Wernicke's area, which have to do with speech production and Phineas Gage. But this was the nail in the coffin for me. So everything that happens in our brain happens due to neuronal firing, right? So a neuron in your brain is like a teeny tiny cell, and that teeny tiny cell has a bunch of axons that come out of it. And those axons are like long strings that are wrapped in an insulated material called myelin, and they communicate with one another in your brain through electrochemical means. So in order for them to fire, there needs to be like a mild electrical signal that's called an action potential that initiates their firing. And when they fire, they send a signal down that axon that goes to the synapse. And the synapse is where at one axon, like the end of an axon, like the dendrites, will connect to, through like a synaptic cleft, another neuron. And they'll send a little chemical like a serotonin or a dopamine or norepinephrine or like multiple types of little chemicals that happen in your brain that each do different things to another neuron. And that's how all of the little neurons in your brain talk to one another, so that we can do things like move and operate our eyes and, taste things and feel things. There's neurons even in our skin, right? We have things called nociceptors and that are in our skin that are also neurons that are like longer, that go into our spine. But that's how we experience and feel and think of everything, right? All of those, we can track that happen through neuronal firing, and we can augment that through drugs and stuff. But in order for that neuron to fire, it needs to have that action potential. So we're back to the action potential, which is what creates the electrical impulse for that neuron to fire, to release the chemicals, to start that chain reaction, so that your brain's doing that billions of times a minute, right? Like it just lights right up. In order for that to happen, there needs to be a specific concentration on either side of the cell. So inside the neuron and outside the neuron, there needs to be a very specific concentration of sodium and potassium ions. And if that concentration reaches a specific threshold, and the mitochondria, and because the neuron's like any other cell, it has a mitochondria inside of it. If that mitochondria produces a chemical called ATP, that ATP, once it reaches a threshold, that mitochondria will produce a chemical called ATP, and that'll open a channel. And that channel allows the sodium and potassium ions, once they reach that threshold, to pass back and forth between the cell membrane. And when that happens, it creates the action potential for that electrical impulse to tell that cell to fire and create a signal.
Right.
Now, why that destroyed the concept of the soul for me is because if we know that neuronal firing is what causes everything. It's what causes movement. It's what causes sensation. It's what causes perception. It's what causes thought. We know all of these things. How does the soul put a specific amount of sodium and potassium ions on either side of a cell membrane and then get a mitochondria to produce ATP at any given time?
So it's like you'd have to imagine literally a soul physically moving things. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like it would need to have little sodium and potassium ion tweezers and go, okay, well, now we want to think about Jesus. and move them all through the brain. And that would need to be happening at such a rapid fire pace throughout the entirety of the brain. The soul would need to be able to do this, that it seems to me that it would be perceptible through things like MRI. Like you would literally see, or it would need to be, or a soul would need to be able to pop these things into and out of existence materially in our head. Neither one of those seem plausible to me. So how does a soul exactly interact with the brain? I think so many people look at the brain and they just think of it as, the soul, the brain just feels stuff. They don't look at it down to the very finite minutiae of the material processes that are actually taking place. So it seems plausible that a soul's probably doing stuff, right? Because your brain, it's like, maybe it just, gives you a feeling, and a feeling is something that's not quantifiable. Well, a feeling kind of is at least locatable. Like we know, we know the brain region that's going to cause it, and we know that those neurons need to fire in order to elicit it. That's a thing that happens materially in the physical world. So,
and it's like it's similar to like when someone would die, and then it's clear like someone's there, and then they die, and then it's like they're no longer there. Right. And so you can from everyone else, like it's like he was here or she was here, and now she's not here. And it's like it's very easy to jump to the thought that there must be something inside them that is left because they're not here anymore. They must be gone. So like you can see how like these ideas create ideas like souls, or like these experiences create things like souls and stuff, because it's an easy way, or the best way at the time, to try and explain why this person was doing something and then now is not doing something. They're gone now.